This is the outside of Bergen & Ball sheep shear manufacturers, Sheffield, the last remaining sheep shear manufacturers in Sheffield, indeed in England. This is the steel. It comes in coils, about 1/3 of a ton in weight, and it comes from Sheffield. Comes in 3 different gauges, depending on the type of shear we're going to make. First of all, it's put onto a reeler and fed through a blanking machine, a blanking out machine. It'll punch one shear after another, and these shears being punched out are double bow, as opposed to 2 blades punched out together, which are single bow. After punching out, they go into a furnace and the bow is formed. The shears are rolled to a length and a thickness. The operator is now going to check the thickness to make sure that it's within tolerance. They want to be down to about 17 gauge. He then throws them onto the floor haphazardly so that they don't kneel. In other words, they don't soften. After they've cooled, they're taken onto a cropping machine and cut down to the right size for the pattern of shear which is going through. This is called cropping, and it'll crop everyone to the same size, to the same length. After cropping, we need to put 2 holes in them so they can be put together later on. It's essential that these holes are spot on, otherwise they won't marry up at the end of the job. After they've been cropped and punched, they go into a furnace at about 1,000 degrees, and they're formed on this machine, marked on the next machine, hollowed on the next machine, and the points are pulled in on the next apparatus, all heated once. And here, that's forming, marking, hollowing, and pulling the points in, and generally straightening the shear up. Here, the operator is making sure that a hollow fits the gauge, or vice versa, the gauge fits the hollow. If he's satisfied, he'll carry on, but he'll do this test about every 3 dozen blades.
Now on the second operation, he puts the mark on.
That's where the mark is. We've got to see that the mark is good enough. That's where he's hollowed them, so that has got to fit a hollow machine. That's the kick, so that later on, when they're assembled, they won't cross over. The blades have got to be standing up straight. The shear has all got to be all in line, and when he's pulled the points together, they've got to be near enough at the same angle for later on in the job.
So that they're all at the same angle to go on the jig on the machine.
Call that pointing.
Well, yeah. Now,
The next job is setting. The shear is still soft, so we set an edge on while it's soft. In other words, we just clean the face up of that cutting edge. After setting, they go to the heat treatment department where they're hardened and tempered. Now they go into a furnace at 850 degrees and they're heated for about 7 minutes, and then they're quenched in whale oil, or whale type oil as we use now. It used to be whale oil from the sperm whale's head, but now we're environmental friendly and we use whale type oil. Whale type oil also has the advantage of a high flash point and is used extensively in Sheffield industry. After they've been quenched, they're then cleaned off, ready for the next operation, which is tempering. The reason they have to be tempered is because when they're hardened, apart from the edge being hardened, some of the hardening runs right through the blade. Consequently, the blade would break. They're tempered at a temperature of 235 degrees for about 5 minutes, depending on the size of the shear and the width of the blade. After tempering, they're drained off, and then when the salts have drained off them, they're then washed in a solution of boiling water and industrial soda. This gets them fairly clean to go on to the next job. There we see some salts remaining on that have got to be washed off. The final job before they go to the machines is that the blades have to be straightened. Now this machine is a hollow grinding machine, and it grinds the inside blades which have been hollow formed previously. Normally, one man works 2 machines in tandem. Yes, the operator is having a quick glance at the shear to see that the finish is as required. There again, when he's finished, he straightens it, the shear, ready for the next operation. After inside grinding, they're taken down to a bosch in the warehouse, and they're boiled up in a solution of water and grinding fluid. Then they're taken into the warehouse, cleaned off, ready for inspection. So have a quick look down the blade, see that the quality's there. The blade hasn't moved on the jig, and if it did, it would be no good because it wouldn't cut then.
Right.
So then I have a quick look at the thickness and a quick look at the back, because if the back's too thin, we'll not get the strength in the blade.
Right.
You can always test them like that. And if they look okay, I'll whip it round to the other end, have a look at the other end. That's the same, that's okay. And I can put it on there. If they're not up to standard here, they're thrown out because it's pointless letting them go any further and then throwing them out later. If they pass the examination, they're then oiled and stacked, ready for the next operation, which is glazing and polishing. The glazer does the shank, the top, the lap, and the back of the blades. After glaze and polishing, they go on to another grinding machine which grinds the whale edge. Now this grinds down to a thickness, and it also hollow grinds so that we finish up with a blade that's double hollow ground. The thickness is to enable a cutting edge to be put on, so we want to keep it fairly thin. After whale edging, they again go in the boiler and are cleaned off, ready for a second examination.
So I spent my day down examining work, setting tubes,
Now we're looking at the width of the whale edge, the shape of the whale edge. We're looking at the quality of the glaze, the quality of the mark. We're looking at the shanks as well, see that they're not burnt. We're looking at the backs to see that they're polished, so that they'll go down the fleece better. If they pass the examination, they're again got ready for the next operation by oiling and stacking. Now these that are being oiled now are single bows, i.e. 2 blades on 1 shear. Some people like double bow, some people like single bow. It's a matter of customer preference. That's our pattern board. Some of those patterns are obsolete, but we can make them again anytime we like. After stacking, they'll be picked up by the benders for the last operation. Here a bender is riveting the double bow together. Here the bender is forming the bow. We call this pulling round. Depending on what type of shear they are, some are stiffer than others to pull round, so consequently he has a hammer at his side if he needs it. If they need a bit of persuasion, like this one, it's going to give it them. That shows you how much wears on the hammer. It's taken years to get like that. The second part of forming the bow is with a vice again. And every man forms his own shaped bow. No 2 men work alike. people that can do this job, you can count on one hand. Now he's knocking each shank down, each bow, side of the bow down. Now he's lifting the blades. Now he's pulling the points in. Everything he can do to make it a balanced shear that cuts for the entire length of the blade. Ralph's been doing this job for 40 odd years. A lot of the jobs he's doing now, he's doing them by feel. They're not always apparent to the eye. But at the end of the day, that shear has got a cut.
Only I live up on Margate Drive.
Oh dear, I don't know that bit now. Oh, you don't live locally?
Yeah.
Live at Watchley?
Oh yeah. Although, I mean, what work I'm so pretty.
Oh,
Nothing left. In fact, they moved pumps up, wasn't it? Oh, you had to put it back. Yes, anybody that could be now.
Here he's taking them onto the stone and he's putting the cutting edge on. Now when he puts the cutting edge on, he stones it until he sees the fash come up at the back of the blade. If you look, you might see the fash, dark blue fash. And then after both blades got the fash up, he cuts the fash off, making sure that it doesn't cut into the edge of the blade. And just see the fash coming up on the back. There on that one as well. And he's cutting the fash off slowly without digging in. Now he's what we call wetting the blade off. That's putting a smooth edge on it with a very hard stone. The stone is Arkansas stone from the United States. And after they've been rubbed with that stone, they'll be really smooth and really sharp. This is the other type of sheep shear, single bow sheep shear. Similar to the double bow shear for working on. Just a matter of customer preference, whether you choose double bow or single bow. Here again, he's knocking them down each side of the bow to put some strength into the shear. Then he's lifting the blades, pulling the points in.
Now I'm going to come forward a bit. Right.
Setting the blades. Obviously putting a bit of twist on the blade. Springing it. Making sure it's balanced. After bending, we go to the warehouse. The warehouse lady oils them, wraps them, and puts them in boxes. The oil she uses is the same oil as we use downstairs, and those shears can be safely stored for 2 years at least, probably longer. Six in a box, and then they go into a packing case. She'll put any labels on that are necessary, depending on where the shear's going to. That's some of our stock, which goes all over the world. The customer can ring up or fax, and he'll get whatever he wants, hopefully out of stock. These shears are going to the Argentine. These are going to Scotland. These are going to a sponge fisherman in Florida, USA. Our shears are not only used for shearing sheep, they're used for various other occupations, such as cutting leather, gardening. They're being loaded now onto a lorry for dispatch.
This is my workshop. I've been here since 1955. The line shaft is a bit of a novelty. Everybody's surprised when they see it. It takes them back. Here we have samples of various trademarks, birds, and there's a foot for a well-known Sheffield firm, an elephant, and capital for Balfours. There's a rook, I made for a chap called Rook. Here I am making a mark for Ken Hawley. Facing the punch to make sure it's smooth and flat. Checking it with a rule to make sure it is flat. Now marking it out. Marking the centre again from where we start to make sure we get it spaced out properly. Next, you could do what is called striking. That's indenting the face we've just filed with a series of countersinks which form the inside of the letters. This is a letter W. We're marking on, which you'll see shortly. Just making sure it's in the centre now. Letter E. There's the letter Y, which is the end of the word Hawley, which we're going to make. Making sure all the time that we're keeping to the centre of the punch, both top and bottom and each end. Now we face it down again to display, to file away the letter with the material displaced by countersinking the letter in. Making sure all the time we keep it level and flat. And marking out again to make sure we're in a line countersinking the letters finally, after we've made sure we know where we are. And the final little levelling on top. Now we're just engraving the inside of the letters to bring them to a satisfactory shape inside before we can deal with the outside. Now filing up. Just removing the material at the bottom and the top. Careful not to go too far and go to the bottom, the top of the letters. This is a smoothing file to give it a smoother finish. Now we deal with the ends. Now we're beginning on the process of clearing our material away from the letters to give them the shape. That's the end of the Y. The next job is to nick in, that is removing the material between the letters with a 3 square file. Here we are. Deciding just how much to take off.
It's quite interesting, Basil, to see how you use your thumb as a guide.
Yes, just to, not to fire the thumb, but just to guide it, finally exactly where you want it. Perhaps you'll see I'm doing a letter E now. Remember all that we were in the reverse, so that when we finally stamp it in, it comes the right way. Here we are with a smaller, smoother file. And then to remove the material which we can't get at with the file, you'll see shortly we chip the chisel. Here we are, just trying to see how far we are on with it. There's a chisel I spoke about, and here we are sharpening it on an oil stone, putting a final edge on the point. When we've chipped, we leave little bits of material standing up, which left hand will mark. So we get the flat tool called a deader to flatten these little bits of steel sticking up. Here we are deading again. Now we're preparing to what we call finish the mark. Sitting down and putting what we call a vice peg into the vice, against which we can place a mark to file finally and engrave it with our engraving tool. Here we are, just taking the final bits of fash off caused by the filing. This is a final bit of smoothing up. Perhaps you can see the word now, K Holy. Just in a final bit of nicking into letter W, giving it the final point at the bottom of the W and at the top point. Between the H and A there.
Are there certain areas that you can't quite get with the file, Basil?
Yes, in letter E, you saw me chipping. You can't get, you have to chip it out with that pointed tool. Then deader down, as I mentioned, to flatten any little bits left. This is just putting the final edge on.
What are you doing there, Basil?
Just taking any material, the sort of bird up material I might have just caused by filing or engraving. So you get a clear, sharp edge. Here we are, testing a mark on paper, which is only a mark before we harden it, which is the next process. And here we are at the furnace, lighting it to heat the mark. And there we are, putting the mark into the furnace. Heat up prior to quenching it, in this case in water. Careful not to get it too hot. In this case it was only a short while because it was only a thin mark, and the furnace was hot, been on some while, it was hot. Now we're quenching it into water, leaving a bit of heat in the punch and the body of the punch to come back up to temper it to be softening it, just to, now we are filing it to get the brightness, and then watch the colour come up, caused by the heat coming up from the lower part of the punch to a straw colour. You can see it there, but you test it by the sizzle, by how quick it sizzles. This I would point out is only for a certain type of steel. Some steel, for better quality mark, needs to be made of a better quality steel and oil hardened. I've worked with that furnace ever since I started mark cutting. At the age of 14 I worked with that furnace. Rubbing it with a brass brush to bring the face up so you can see, and it cleans it. Now we're marking a wooden handle at it to do the job it was made for. There we are. The mark and impression on the handle. Making a label on a two-dimensional engraving machine. First we sort our type out, the letters we follow to engrave. Here we are setting the letters up, spelling the words out, and then centralizing these words on the top to ensure that we work from the center all the time. Having set the letters up, we now have to do the same with the plate. And here we are, taking the wrappers off a plate and measuring the center from the ends and the center from the top. Now, having done that, we fasten the plate down onto the bed of the machine, making sure to follow the lines we've made on the centres. And here we are, setting up engraving. The right hand follows the stylo, and the left hand engraves the spinning tool, deepening it and lifting it out of the letter when it's been engraved and dropping it into the next one. Here we are doing the H, having done the S. Perhaps you realise we are making made in Sheffield, and there's a last E in Sheffield. Now we're on to the made, and there's the D, and there's the thing complete. There's the letter we followed to make the label.